My dream has always been to start a nonprofit. That is the dream.
You go out and you proactively create that opportunity for yourself.
I just distinctly remember sitting in my meetings thinking, what the fuck am I doing here?
You get to these moments where you realize that you need to go a different direction.
Often just felt like I was really overworked. My mental health wasn't great. I left this really high-paying job to make way less money. I had so many friends say, oh my gosh, Jen, like you are so much happier.
I think there's a lot of people who don't realize how mental health is impacted by their career choices.
Ooh, ding, ding, ding.
Imagine realizing the path you're on, even at the peak of success, isn't aligned with what truly drives you. What does it take to leap into the unknown, driven by a passion that's hard to ignore? Today's guest, Jen Wong, faced that very crossroads and made a bold move from a prestigious role at Dropbox to carve out her own journey in entrepreneurship and design. I'm Chris Abad, and you're listening to Pixelated Path. In this episode, we dive deep into Jen's story, how she transitioned from the tech world to start a nonprofit, the challenges she faced as a designer with ADHD, and the lessons she learned about staying authentic in a fast-paced industry. We'll also explore her insights on leveraging AI and UX design. We'll also talk about how she managed to maintain her mental health through all of the ups and downs in her career. If you're curious about making your own career leap, or just looking for strategies to thrive in your current role, this episode's for you. Don't forget to subscribe to Pixelated Path so you never miss out on the inspiring stories and actionable tips that we share every episode. And now, let's get to it. Welcome to Pixelated Path. Jen, we're thrilled to have you. So today, we're just going to talk about your career and ups and downs that you've had along the way and kind of, how you've gotten to where you are.
All right, yeah. Should I start from the very, very beginning, or is there a certain kind of point that you think would be good to start with?
I have some questions I want to jump into, but maybe, starting from the very beginning would be cool. Tell me, how did you even get interested in design? Where did that come from?
Yeah. So I went to school at UCLA, and I was a sociology major, and sociology majors are known to not do much with their lives, or that's the stereotype. And were they wrong? I mean, no, I honestly did not know what I was doing with my life, and I sucked at a lot of my jobs that I did. So, you know what? I was like, my dream has always been to start a nonprofit for foster care children, because for me, I grew up moving from home to home, and that was a really important cause to me. And it was called Fosterity and Beyond. Very cute. And there were different people I was working with, but ultimately, things kind of fall through when you ask your college friends for help. They're busy, so, the plans didn't always go through. So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to make a logo by going on LinkedIn Learning, which is lynda.com back then, and figure out how to make a logo. And that's really how I learned. I think you kind of see these early roots of just following my heart. And I think that's obviously that's always going to be my advice to anyone. If you feel like you suck at something and you don't know what to do, it's maybe you do, but maybe there's something else better. And I'm so happy that my college friends didn't help out when for certain things, and I ended up doing it myself. That was that entrepreneurial mindset, which has again been such a basis for my entire career. So just being really hands-on and learning how to do that myself, learning how to make a website. What am I even trying to do with this website? I want people to learn about the foster care cause. How do I get people to donate? Buy these bracelets, because if you buy one bracelet, I think it was the proceeds go to the foster care beneficiaries. And those are really the start of UX, right? How do you get people to understand this cause that no one really knows about? People think it's like the movie Annie. You just oh, I lost my parents. I guess this rich family is just going to save my life now and everything is going to be fine. No, how do you actually communicate what this cause is to people, right? So yeah, I decided to do that my summer going into my senior year. My aunt was like, Jen, I think you need a real job. But I was serious. I was serious about this nonprofit. I turned down internship interviews. And honestly, I'm so glad I did, because that summer, because I was like, I'm going to go all into this nonprofit. I signed up for a UX class through General Assembly, not the boot camp, but just like an intro class, actually with no intention of becoming a designer. It was really, I don't have a UX designer. I learned what it is. Sounds great. No one else is going to be that, so I'm going to do that. So as you can see, me doing the nonprofit was just me learning a bunch of skills because I couldn't hire anyone, didn't have the funds to. And then, lo and behold, that's kind of, I was like, well, my aunt says I should get a real job. I took this class. If I should find a real job besides this nonprofit, I guess it will be a UX designer. And I think by that time my senior year rolled around, it was like, obviously doing a nonprofit, I'm completely on my own, just not being very good at asking for help, and tons of reasons why it didn't work out.
Nice. Just hearing especially some of the earlier parts of your story, I know that one thing that's really important to you is just being your authentic self through all of that. And it's like really clear that that was one of your motivating factors in addition to that entrepreneurial spirit. Can you tell me more about why you feel being your authentic self is so important?
Yeah, wow. That's a good question. I really appreciate you asking me that. I think that there are times growing up just like living in a house of people I didn't know very well, or just not feeling like I belonged. I think when I wasn't authentic, being in these households, I just felt like I felt like I was held back. Everything about me, my personality was like a little bit more diluted. So it's like, but I think and then I think once I got to college, and I think, doing that nonprofit and just starting to be like, am I doing a bunch of these things that I'm just terrible at or don't care about? Why am I just, someone says I want to do marketing or product management, and I was like, I guess I'll just say what they're saying. It's like, it just felt like putting on clothes that just didn't fit me, is how I describe it. And people can tell that inauthenticity. So I think just having grown up in a place where I've just felt like a diluted version of myself, I didn't feel happy. And like that just impacting the way people perceive me. I think there's just a lot that comes out of being authentic, right? You are literally, when you're yourself, you shine. People see it, and then, I don't know. I just believe in just like, stop BSing yourself. Like, I always believe people, the answer. It's inside you. You just like let that noise drown you out, and then you don't know who you are, and you're just, yeah, you're not shining. So yeah, that's always my answer why it's like really important to me. Just the way that it's played a role in my life, and yeah.
I'm sure a lot of that has just been this like consistent process of growing and learning throughout. But was there like a pivotal point, you think, where things changed for you? Because you started as sort of feeling like you were not being true to yourself and following others, and then like I think now you're certainly very far away from that with the roles that you've held, and then also some of the things that you've done on your own, both professionally and then also things like the nonprofit and other things that I know you've done. What flipped the switch for you?
I think there's like almost different levels of switches that I was flipping. I think certainly was doing the nonprofit, not just doing what my peers were doing. I felt like I got to this really big dream at that time, which was to get into some big tech company that had a great design team. But I think I still didn't quite feel fulfilled. I mean, part of it was maybe like I wasn't passionate about file storage. Part of it was like, I guess I was just hungry for more, right? And I think I left this really high paying job to make way less money. I think that was really hard. And I think the big switch for me is, you go from this thing that people value so much, this, oh my God, Dropbox, or people really looked up to me for that, and then just throwing it away. I wanted to go to grad school, which I'm going to UC Berkeley, to study social entrepreneurship. And I don't know, I just was like, I just need to make something of my own or with other people, or join something, be scrappy, and just and just like break my own status quo. And entering into that world of entrepreneurship, it felt like really right at the time. I think obviously my family was like, why the hell would you do that? That's really stupid. And then, I at different capacities, I like did my own startup. I was at another startup, later on. No one knew whatever I was working on, and it was like it's actually kind of cool. It was actually really cool to have people just like have no idea what you're working on, and some people would just say things like, "Oh, no name startup." But it was like this was a good switch for me. It's like I want to just leave the world of status and whatever this that people care about money and just live in the world of uncertainty.
Hmm.
And it was, yeah. So that was a big switch. Just going away from like what I think people in society like really care about.
That can be such a big decision because, like you said, so many people see their career path as sort of linear and constantly, hopefully, up and to the right. And like you said, like some people see that as kind of going in the wrong direction. What was it like leading up to that decision? Was that something that you debated for a long time, or did you just get to a moment where it just felt right and happened?
Yeah, like the decision to go into like world of entrepreneurship, quit my tech job.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think about the moment, maybe it was just a series of moments. Well, I just distinctly remember sitting in my meetings with talking about, I don't know, like the technical guts of file storage. And I just remember sitting there thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? What is going on? What is happening? But prior to that, the reason why I thought that was because I guess I had always spent all this time after work, like volunteering, working on different projects. Like I worked for Angels Foster Care, yeah, nonprofit foster care agency. Yeah, just different nonprofits. And it's like, this true passion that I have, why is that not my full-time gig? So that's part of the reason why it was like there was just this really big dichotomy between what I love to do after work and what I was doing at work. That's kind of why I had this like WTF moment on top. Like, why didn't you just like join something else or just do something on the side? And even then, those words just didn't sit. And I think I always ask like everyone, to the people who are listening to this, like, let what someone's saying just like, sit with you. You don't have to like, do anything right. Just let it sit with you. Like, how does that feel? And I don't know. It just felt uncomfortable to hear like my decision to go to grad school and like not know what I was doing and experiment and just like I don't know, see what happens. Yeah, I guess I just really want to do it. If it felt uncomfortable that they said that and it was uncomfortable because it felt like poo poo on my dream, like, oh yeah, well shoot, this is really my dream. I feel really uncomfortable by it. So I don't know, that's kind of like a series of events that just kind of led me to like, what, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. Just I've been too uncomfortable for too long, and I think that's the issue, right? A lot of people don't take these actions because they're just not uncomfortable enough. And I think I definitely I could have stayed where I was because I wasn't dying. I was in a great position. It's hard to leave when you have something really good and just like drop everything that you ever worked for. I mean, prior to Dropbox, it's crazy. I remember literally company I was before, I was crying to myself all the dang time. Like, I'm not a real designer because I'm not at these companies. I suck because I was just I would beat myself up over everything. It's like finally got what I wanted, and then, you know, that's what I used to like value was like being at like having this design status and like because I wanted this stamp of approval that honestly doesn't matter. So I don't know. I guess like what I valued in life and what I cared about just change over time. And I think as you get more and more uncomfortable with what you used to value, like really sit on that. Like, dude, it's okay to let go of what you used to care about.
One thing that's really interesting is I think you get to these moments where you realize that you need to go a different direction. And you go out and you like proactively create that opportunity for yourself sometimes rather than always relying on someone else to provide that or bring that
Yeah.
to you. So at this point, like you've been through that a few times, do you feel like you have like an overall strategy for how you guide and grow your career, or do you feel like this is more of a moment by moment thing?
I don't know if this is the best answer, the answer people want to hear, but okay. I mean, I think sometimes I seem like a moment to moment person. Like, I know, for example, my decision to go to grad school, yeah, I maybe made that decision in like 8 hours, but it's more than that. It's not necessarily that it took 8 hours, or what it seems like on the surface. It's not necessarily moment by moment. It's more like, oh, I'm reflecting on all these times, and the actual length of moments are longer than they seem, right? And the actual decision period, it might be shorter. So it kind of depends on like what you measure by like a moment. But I would say, if I were to say my strategy, a lot of it is just like literally self-reflection, introspection, and just like, even if it's like documenting like, how did I feel after XYZ thing happened, and just, I just naturally introspect a lot, so I guess it's not hard for me to notice when like, oh yeah, I've been feeling a little down for the past month, or like, yeah, I don't think my situation is, or I don't like think I look forward to coming to work, where I'm like, I'm dreading this a lot, and it's been happening for like a couple months now. So I would say like be mindful, and when you're mindful and you reflect, I think that kind of gives you the context, because I think it's kind of hard to strategize without having context, unlike yourself. The other strategy, like, ask your friends, and they're gonna like, when you, for example, I have when I was doing entrepreneurship and I was working on my startup, I had so many friends say, oh my gosh, Jen, like, you are so much happier, like, you just literally just seem happier. And I think that helps me kind of lean more into what I was doing and increasing my investment into entrepreneurship, because people were noticing the difference. So I think it's helpful to ask the people around you. And I think the third thing is, yeah, I don't know if it's the best answer, but honestly, it's following your heart. Like, when you have this feeling that like pricks you inside and it's telling you like, you should maybe do that sticker business. You don't have to do it. Oh, sorry, the camera. You don't have to do it full time. You can just start on the side and like let it grow, but just take that first step. Honestly, sometimes the thing to do is just do something, right? It doesn't have to be that full investment if you don't want to. That's like another strategy. I think that's probably the recommended strategy. I'll be honest, for me, historically speaking, I'm kind of just like all in. Like, what happened? Like I said, right? I'll have this. It'll seem like I make these decisions spur of the moment, but really it's through a series of introspection on a bunch of different moments, right? For my nonprofit, yeah, by like the second or third job where I just like suck at admin work, and I think maybe I really should not be doing this, or I should just do entrepreneurship. Like, it took several roles and people getting mad at me for me to think, okay, right? At Dropbox, it took probably like, a year or so of those meetings for me to realize I don't get excited in these meetings. So it's, yeah, but generally speaking, all my friends know that once something clicks in my mind and I have that intuition, I just freaking go for it. I just don't hold back, because I'm kind of an extreme person, but it's just my personal preference.
So now you're a senior designer at Netflix. Where
Hmm.
Talk me through like where that fits in this journey of yours, and whether that's kind of aligned with some of the entrepreneurial things that you've talked about, or whether you're intentionally making a shift. Like, what are your thoughts behind your current role?
Yeah, honestly, one of my friends said I was a sellout for coming here. Maybe they're half joking. I don't know. Another friend that I ran into was like, oh, I feel like the founder in you is probably like really struggling there, huh? And so I know to some people it might seem like this is kind of random that I joined Netflix, but like I said, I know sometimes things seem random in my life, but there's thought. So, after doing a few years of entrepreneurship, from doing a side business to doing grad school to doing, I lose track, but then a 5-person startup, it was just really exhausting. As much as I love the adrenaline, I crave the adrenaline, I love that dopamine, it often just felt like I was really overworked, and my mental health wasn't great. But when I think about why my mental health wasn't great, it's not just like, oh, it's entrepreneurship or not. There's just so many nuances. You know, if you have a really strong team or you collaborate really well, it kind of helps you like not struggle as much with mental health, or like there's just so many factors, right? Financial runway. And ultimately, I'm saying, like, I'm not saying I never want to do entrepreneurship again, right? In fact, shoot, I help out my boyfriend with his business, and that's how I scratched my itch of being a founder at work, right? Like I had this hackathon idea, and like now I'm like really spearheading it. I want to like turn it into something. So I'm reaching out to a bunch of different teams. I don't think anything is ever the end all be all, and it's like that final step, right? If I were to join another startup, I'm open to being a founder again, but I feel like I need to know the person's working style. We've had to work together for like a year or some time. I'm like familiar with their working style. Depends on the problem. Like, are they really curious to learn? There's all those factors. Then maybe, I'll talk when that time comes, but I'm here to save my sanity. So being in just that constant uncertainty, which I was for a few years, I just took a toll on my mental health. Once I got to Netflix, like the reason why I chose this company was not 100% because like, oh, I want financial stability, but I was looking for a company that still had startup roots. And I think Netflix is one of those tech companies that still acts like a startup. I mean, this is a little dialed down now, but freedom and responsibility is still a value. I work on the Netflix studio side, and yeah, the pace we move at, the style is still like a startup. It's just kind of like a different path. That is kind of how I'd say Netflix fits into my journey. But I would say the other part, being at startups, I was always like the only designer, or I was like the most senior designer. I just felt like there was a cap to what I was learning. Sure, I learned from Dropbox, but like learning at senior stage with more senior people is completely different. I mean, my coworkers at Netflix just like blow my mind just how incredibly talented, thoughtful they are about how they solve problems. Sometimes I'm like, shoot, let me take a screenshot of that because like what they did, that was inspiring. I didn't really have that as much in a startup. You're like, don't even take the screenshot, go work. But so that was the other reason why I decided to come here, so that if I ever wanted to be a founder again, like I've got more skills, I have more process because I've worked here. That's kind of how I see it.
I think there's a lot of people, especially earlier in their career, who don't get figure out how to turn that off. Okay. I think there's a lot of people who, especially earlier in their careers, don't realize how mental health is impacted by their career choices or what they do, or they don't really consider it as part of their decision process. And I know for you, this is something that you've worked on for a long time. What other strategies do you have for like managing your own mental health at work?
Oh man, this is really good because I really struggled with this at Netflix. Like it was really bad, like crippling anxiety bad. Not because of, I think, honestly, everyone was really nice to me. It's just I was my own obstacle. I was my own barrier. Um, so I can probably talk to this more recently. I think being at Netflix, it's like everyone is really talented, and I mean, it's no secret. Like if you are not performing, and obviously they give you a performance improvement plan. So I think if that doesn't work out, then they will let you go. I heard you just like walk out in style, so it's not a bad thing at all. I just kept doubting myself all the time. And it's funny, like the way that people try to make themselves feel better, I don't think is actually the most productive. And that's what I was doing. I would think like, oh, so and so is like not responding to me. And I would think to myself, like, it must be because I'm not being useful. It must be because like they hate me. And then I would try to make myself feel better by saying, oh, they're probably just really busy. And my therapist, which thank you to, Netflix for giving me really good mental health benefits. Please use them if your company gives you them. I mean, my therapist was, when she walked my thought process with me, she was like, what's interesting? You don't actually validate yourself. I'm like, what are you talking about? I said that they're not responding to me because they're busy. She was like, well, you're validating them. do you think you've been useful? What evidence do you have that shows that you've been useful? And then I was like, I actually had a lot to say. I was like, well, I went out and did this analysis on my own and I covered this thing and X, Y, and Z. It was like, holy crap, I'm actually really proud of myself. I am useful. Why do I keep defaulting to that? So that's why my strategy to other people is like, which is why another strategy that I incorporated that's been so helpful is a work wins diary. Now, work wins, not because like I don't have this list of just things that people praise me for because that's external validation. What do I feel proud of about something that I've done? And some things like people would never recognize me for, but I feel really proud of it that I did that. Or they don't know that for me to get to like this thing that they really liked, I had to do XYZ things and I'm proud of that. So I think when people are just overly reliant on affirmations from other people, which I've totally been guilty of, it's very toxic because it's unrealistic that people are going to tell you good job every time. These are very actionable, but hard, right? Because they're habits. But yeah, I definitely think mental health needs to be incorporated because I think that a lot of people rely on this external validation and it is just so toxic and draining. You will find yourself fighting for someone's validation, overworking yourself, beating yourself up. And I know all about that. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
The work wins is such a great tip. And this, I think, gets a little bit into like the external validation you were talking about. But I think if you're doing work wins, it can be really easy to fall into that trap of looking at those things. And like you said, those are things that a lot of people may not necessarily even realize to praise you for, but you feel good about them. But as you start reading through that, you start realizing the gap between like some things on there are really clear for other people and they've recognized you for, but you start seeing this list of things that you are proud of that you've put work into, but other people didn't notice. So how do you manage that? Like how do you not have that get you back into that trap of looking for the external validation?
I mean, part of like not constantly looking for external validation is, I mean, even I follow the habits sometimes, but like trying to make it a daily habit of writing something you're proud of about yourself every day. I think that helps. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest thing. A lot of it is just habit, right? Like there's this concept, and there's a concept it's actually science, but neuroplasticity, like we're just so trained to think a certain way because that's just what we're used to, and we need to train our brain to just like not constantly seek it, right? So I think I mean, I guess setting expectations, I think that's something that I started to do. Like, for example, I know that if I ask for feedback from this person, most of the time they are going to give me constructive feedback. And if they don't say something like very positive, like I like X, Y, and Z, it's not because that they don't think I'm doing a good job, because they're just doing, I know that for that person, they really just care about me. I can tell they care about me. They check in on me. They ask me how I'm feeling. When I ask for feedback, they respond really fast. So on top of the work ones, I started doing like gratitude. What am I grateful for at work? I'm grateful that these people like give me feedback so thoughtfully. They give really great suggestions. I think that also helps me not seek external validation because I was just grateful to even have them talk to me. And coming from that lens was like this two-pronged approach, I think was really helpful.
That's awesome. That's such great advice. I really appreciate that. I want to switch gears a little bit. And earlier you were talking about, what it's like cuz at being a senior designer at Netflix and now you're on a team, but you also have other people who are also like very senior and very skilled that you can learn from. One thing that I know you talked about is the ability to be a senior designer, not just on like big projects that are complex and have a lot of scope, which I think people assume comes with the role, but you work on small projects too. But there's still opportunity to be sort of senior in those moments. Can you tell me more about that? Like, how have you, now that you're a senior designer, how does that show up for you in even small projects?
Yeah. I would say at Netflix, like I am on a team it's like the poster child, like one of their internal studio tools that's kind of been mature and it's doing great. Like, and because of that, I'm happy to be on this team because people really look up to this team. Well, because we're mature, we're gonna have naturally just smaller projects because they're like not like busting a mission to like build this app out of nowhere. So actually, like, this is something I deal with all the time. But I think how I try to think about the small project. This used to be an issue I had like earlier in my career where I would just feel like, oh, this isn't super huge and complex and it's like small. You were the one who told me that like any senior designer would be able to make any tiny thing inspiring. You can make a freaking changing button copy inspiring. That is how you sell it, and it's what you make of it. So I think for what I've done is you can always just dig deeper into the problem, right? Like I would look at like we use full story. I watch full story videos and like what patterns can you see there that like maybe people aren't doing this like, call it dirty work, but like the investigative work, right? You're going to find different things. Things aren't always what meets the eye, right? So it's just having that really analytical lens, that intuition, like I'm going to dig deeper than what it seems, right? And that's how I like found a bunch of things that actually ended up relating to this other project that we did. You're going to start to see how small problems intersect with other problems and larger ones. And so I think that's kind of what motivates me. In another project, yes, like the interaction design itself is small and it was considered a small project, but now it's grown into like a really big strategic project that has a lot of implications. Like, get philosophical. I think one of the honestly easiest ways to make a small project like really impactful and interesting is just like question like what is a this? What is a tag? What is a note? What is a freaking whatever? Get a debate, get people going, challenge the status quo. Yes, there's this small thing that lives in a system, but is it part of a larger systemic problem that we have? I feel like a lot of my projects all have to do with that. Like, even though they start off small, it's like you're peeling onions only to realize that when you think you've peeled to the center of the onion, no, the whole, there was always a larger onion and you just have not gotten to the center. Now you're just at this really massive onion. So that's kind of how that would be, I guess, how I've approached small projects. And it's also really how you sell it. You can also spend more time in the problem and opportunity framing. So now with every project, even if I have a product brief, I actually go and do my own problem and opportunity framing because I actually just find it helps me just like feel the problem more. Like, how can I articulate this problem in a different way? What's the overarching problem? What are the sub problems? Like, how is this connected to other problems I might not have thought about? How do we keep tabs on them? How do we think about like a vision or a future? So yeah, there's so many ways to not be bored is what I would say, and grow your skills.
Another thing that I think comes with being more senior and more experienced is not taking a project at face value and digging in and making sure you understand it. I know also another thing that you feel strongly about is not always doing what you're told and sometimes going back and challenging and disagreeing. Can you tell me more about that? Why is that so important to you?
I think I hate my job if I always did what I was told because that would be stifling my creativity. I think when I guess it's not that like I can't like follow what someone has and someone's saying. It's just like I want the freedom to be able to challenge and push back and ask questions. And from there we'll see what happens. So it's not like, oh, I can't have anyone like tell me what to do and I have to be my own boss. And it's not the situation. I just think in the creativity is just what makes me really happy. Creativity meaning like this creativity just makes me really happy. That's what drives me, is being able to like use my mind. And I can't, yeah, that's what I would say. And I think people who are more junior, I think, find themselves doing as they're told because, it's scary to push back or ask more questions. But honestly, sometimes I just ask questions and I'm like, I don't really know where this is going to go. But, I feel like I just have this intuition that I should just dig and ask this question. And sometimes sometimes you just don't really fully know. You're just like, kind of just like use your spidey senses. It means something. I think designers' intuition is like often underutilized.
One thing that you mentioned earlier was just recognizing how things are with you having ADHD and how that factors into like how you make decisions or how you work or how you stay focused. I think there's a lot of designers out there who also have ADHD, but they haven't really like figured out how to work through that in a professional context. What are some strategies that you've learned over the course of your career to help with that?
Yeah, great question. Personally, for me, when I'm bored, I am really, really sad. So when I think about choosing roles, I'm not here to choose something that's like doesn't interest me and I don't feel like I'm going to be challenged. So I look for things that are a little bit more fast paced. I think in the past I thought it was purely industry, but it's not. I know because of my ADHD, I need things to be a little bit more fast moving. If we take too long to make a decision or mobilize, it is going to really frustrate me and I'm going to be bored and be sad. And that will affect my mood. So, yeah, I think that's part of it. I think also I think one of the strengths that I've learned is like hyper focus. So I know this is kind of hard to do, like how to strategize, but like I generally now I think I really think about when I choose different roles or different projects, I try to think about like if it's something that seems simple, right? What do I really get excited about? What do I tend to do when I hyper focus? Think about when you're hyper focusing, it means you're in flow mode. You're just really into what you're doing. As a designer, think about like what stuff do you get really into? For me, I'm get really in the zone when I'm just digging. I don't know what I'm digging for, but I dig. And then it's like a treasure hunt. Like, oh, I'm looking at these metrics or I'm looking through these documents and something seems weird and these things seems fishy. And I just kind of go into this rabbit hole and that thing is good, so that's why I start off my projects like doing that because it just gets me like motivated and interested in what I'm doing. One, you don't take things at face value because sometimes that would not it might seem boring, but two, right, I'm doing that thing that like gets me hyper focused and then I get all this context, I learn these insights, I learn these things we didn't know before, and then bam, I'm like, whoa, this project looks different from where I started. Now I'm really excited. So those are kind of some strategies that I've tried. Another one is rejection dysphoria. We definitely take criticism like more, like it hurts more than maybe like the average person. I don't actually know the science behind it, but I just know it's a thing. I know I have rejection dysphoria, so I think that's why all those strategies that I've talked about earlier about mental health, I really work on employing them because I know that I'm going to be more sensitive than like some other people. And so I have to work harder at being self-compassionate. And so part of these ADHD strategies are kind of knowing like you as a person, where do you kind of like struggle more with and just like doubling down. I know I struggle with rejection. I know I struggle with boredom. Yeah, so if I struggle with boredom, another strategy I think is like, how many tasks can I get done in today? Or like, oh, like let's have this deadline. I sorry, I completely forgot that. I'll be like, okay, there's no set deadline because we're kind of in this chill period, but you know what? I'm gonna do this investigative work, and like by next week, I'm gonna have this done, and I'm gonna ask for feedback, and then you're kind of gamifying it. Yeah, I need to do that to stop myself from being bored.
I think you've
So
touched a
yeah,
little
those
on
are my
this.
strategies.
One thing I was going to ask, and I think you've touched on this a little bit, is as you described those strategies and how you work, I think there's a lot about being an entrepreneur and running your own startup that you would think fit really well for that. And so how much of your approach needs to change when you're at a larger company like a Dropbox or like a Netflix?
Oh, yeah. I think I noticed like at a startup, you're always entertained. There is just an endless pile of things to do. Uh, you don't even have time to think. You're just going. So for sure, like I think for like people with ADHD, like that's why a lot of them are entrepreneurs because they're just like going, and you just throw ideas against the wall and hope it sticks. Whereas I think larger companies, I think because things move a lot slower, I think just thinking about it like What can you do to fill that time? Surely it's not just, I'm going to spend 5 months designing, like literally on Figma. That's not at all. So you kind of need to map out what are these milestones that you can do. Honestly, like that is what motivates me. I'm like, oh, I have this time, like I'm gonna just get more context. And I know I love chatting with people when we're like brainstorming or just learning about each other. So that's what I do to fill that time. You need to be strategic about filling that time with things you want to do. Obviously, like there are things you need to do to solve the problem that you're just going to have to do. So definitely incorporate those. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. And I think even at large companies, you need to spend the time getting the context anyways. There's just so many teams, so many roadmaps, so many priorities, so much history. So like have fun with it. Yeah, and I think that deadline tip that I said, you really need to, especially for like passion projects. I always have passion projects at work. There isn't always a deadline. It's probably the project you're most interested in. It's the most pie in the sky, or it's gonna like really change things up. But it needs momentum, and I think those things have always motivated me at work. But I need to be responsible for that momentum, planning it out, and like not giving up. Kind of what I was saying, what we were talking about before, like don't wait to do as you're told. Like sometimes you need to be the one who's gonna be that entrepreneur to like push this idea. But once that ball gets rolling, it will help you. Those passion projects actually help motivate you to do some of the other work at work that maybe isn't so sexy. That's why I always really encourage people to balance both. Like I always have a passion project. In fact, a lot of the passion projects that I had, say quote unquote, because I don't know why I'm quoting, they were passion projects. Ended up getting shipped, or or they got traction. So I don't think passion projects are a wasted time. I think they help motivate you.
Some of the other things that you were talking about, like when you have that extra time, and whether it's digging through user research or metrics or hopping on a call with someone so that you can get more historical context on a project. For some people, those can be tough because, like you said, you don't know where it's going. You don't know if anything's going to come of it. And so there's like a risk that it feels unproductive or is a waste of time. When's the last time you went down a path like that and you ended up uncovering something that like helped you move in a direction that you probably wouldn't have otherwise?
I guess trying to think. Well, there's the hackathon project. Maybe I can talk about like a project that was like an actual project that was like on the roadmap. I think what happened was, well, where I had a lot of time and I was on this project, and I think I went. We were saying like, oh, there's just like so many things in this list of options that the user selects. And we kept saying that, and I was like, so what's in there? We kind of scroll through it, but like, what is it? So I just went and like literally, oh man, I created a Google spreadsheet. I manually typed in every dang option in that little scrolly. Sorry, I forgot that's the cat feeder. You can edit that out. I forgot it goes off at this time. So I uploaded everything typed it out, then uploaded to ChatGPT, and then we were able to see user patterns. Like, oh, okay, like people these are user generated categories in this list, and they tend to be by department and X, Y, and Z. We're like, oh, then we started realizing, wait, these people are making these categories as a substitute for some other thing. It's actually a workaround. So we actually ended up identifying like 10 workarounds, which were part of this larger problem, which intersected with this other project, which is like, what are we making like tags about? I don't know if I'm explaining this best, but basically people were just doing like a workaround for something else, and we just didn't even realize. Like, and right, in product, when there's a workaround, it's like, ooh, ding ding ding, that means something's going wrong in our product, and the people are doing things they're not supposed to be doing. But that's like an example of like, I didn't have to do that, no one told me to do it. Honestly, it could have been pretty simple, but we started to see how those two different separate projects were related, and then people started sharing this spreadsheet with other people. They started bringing up in meetings and referencing it. It was this giant piece of analysis that I did. And so I think that's an example of like, did I know where this was gonna take me? I had no idea. Was like, we keep saying that there's a lot of stuff in here, so like, why don't we just think about like what it is? It never. I just think like it doesn't hurt to do a quick analysis. Right now, it's being referenced and relates to this other project.
You mentioned using ChatGPT as part of that whole like spreadsheet and the analysis. Do you find yourself using like ChatGPT and other AI tools at work often?
Yes, I use ChatGPT all the time. We use Copilot, which is like an enterprise version of it. So unfortunately, I can't upload images and spreadsheets. So there's some like manual workarounds, but I use it all the time. And I think I use it as a soundboard. So obviously, like for the analysis of like all those categories in this giant list, I did look at I did try to think like what is my own human analysis, but I like to compare and contrast it with the AIs because I find that sometimes they see things that I don't see, or sometimes I see things that it doesn't see, and then I provide that context to the AI, and then we're just like collaborating with each other. So I use AI as a soundboard. And honestly, like soundboarding is helpful. Like I don't work in an office where I can just like constantly ping someone like, hey, what do you think of this? Hey, let's soundboard. Hey, let's jam like 24/7. For me, I'm constantly doing that because I have AI. Obviously, I do it with my coworkers, but I mean that's like one of my favorite benefits of using it on top of like analyzing data sets. I use it to help me with problem and opportunity framing. I just use it as kind of like a second opinion because it might say something and it inspires an idea. So that's how I use it.
I, I have to ask this because I feel like AI in the UX industry is kind of a hot topic right now, especially with some of
Yeah.
Figma's latest announcements. How are you worried? Like, how do you think AI is going to affect your job in the next few years?
Yeah. For me personally, I don't feel worried. And I think one part of it is that I'm very comfortable with GPT prompting. Like my prompts are they can be very advanced. So I use it all the time. So I'm just naturally comfortable with it. I know like its limitations and whatnot. So yeah, part of it is like if you are interacting with it, it's kind of like, yo, I'm so intimidated by this person. But once you become friends with them, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad because you're talking to them. You're like, oh, it's like this person's a cool person. That's how to describe AI. And I think, secondly, I think that the reason why I'm not worried is because I think a lot of my job is very strategic. It is about collaboration. Like I have jam sessions with my coworkers. We think through really meaty problems or like the history of this project and whatnot. It's just it's hard to replace that live collaboration that you get with your coworkers and like aligning and coming to a decision. Like a lot of the problems we have at work, like I don't think an AI can just come in and solve. You have to talk to like 10 different teams and make human decisions. But however, I think where I do feel like I would be more worried if I weren't doing strategic work and I was just doing execution work. Like, okay, go make this like homepage. That's where I think when you're not exercising that like creativity and like not just like doing the mock-up, like most of the time it's not about the mock-up, it's about like the context, like what the users you're serving. Are they like, for Netflix we have like a ton of different types of users and from different regions and different types of films, like comedy, scripted. You can't United States scripted might be different from something else's. Like all those nuances, like I as a human account for, but we also learn because I talk to our end users and I built those relationships. That is very hard to replicate, I think, with AI. So that's why we're at a difference between like, right, that I'm talking about and just like, oh, I made a button. And I think you are more at risk because you're not like thinking about like what relationships I need to build, what people do I need to talk to, and XYZ to make this decision.
Just to expand on that point, I'm going to read between the lines a little here. Does that mean that you think that AI is going to take over a lot of the execution part of what a UX designer does?
I do. I do think that it will, I think it will take over some of the execution work. I think if it was like, I think that when it comes to, for example, basic patterns, AI probably actually knows. I even asked the AI, like, what pattern do you think I should use? I think when it comes to patterns and ideas, it probably already has that history. Like, I don't know, use a bold button if you want an action, like you want to drive more action. Like, how do you get someone to like purchase this shoe? Probably, I think it will figure it out. Things like that. I do think that's very possible. I was actually talking about this with a engineer, and he's a staff engineer, and he's like, yeah, I think a lot of my job will actually be done by AI, but the more of that strategic collaboration, those kind of things, that will stay. So I think that's why I always tell junior designers, like, sure, you can do Figma and do the execution work, but like always try to challenge stakeholders, push back, because AI is not going to be pushing back, right? The best ideas, the best solutions are born out of collaboration, challenging each other nicely, right? Not like yelling, but I mean, having healthy debate. If you the more that you engage in that as a junior designer, the more you grow that skill set, you learn about what it means to be strategic, what it means to be thoughtful in your decisions, and you'll realize it's not just about, Figma.
You mentioned
But
earlier,
yeah, I do.
one thing that you mentioned earlier is like the way that you use Copilot, ChatGPT, like your prompts are pretty sophisticated. And definitely this is not part of the job description, but do you think prompt engineering is an important skill that UX designers need to learn?
Absolutely. Yes, I do think so. I got super into prompt engineering. Like, I'm super passionate about it. Like, it's just so fun. Here's the reason why. Here's an example in this like hackathon project that I worked on, where I like worked on creating the prompt, but I also combined it with user research. That is really like the power of it, right? People complain all the time that, oh, well, these prompts, they spit out things that aren't useful or it's too vague. Yeah, because you need to add parameters, right? I said, like, for example, detect ambiguity. What is ambiguity? I talk to end users to figure out what do they find ambiguous in their work, right? Using colloquialisms like we are icky, like what is that could be interpreted in so many different ways, right? That's an example of ambiguity. So the more of that context and that user research that you embed into your GPT prompts, the more useful it is. I guess kind of taking a step back, like what are you even using these GPT prompts for? Probably should have mentioned that. I think designers should be responsible for designing algorithms or designing GPT prompts, right? For example, my last job, we were basically Grammarly for speech, and we're giving you feedback on your online speaking or how you speak in online meetings. Are you clear? Are you concise? Whatnot. What does personalized feedback even mean? What information are you giving to people? I was one who, went and experimented, like, okay, I'm taking this transcript. Okay, but out of this transcript, we learned that people want examples of being like, I'm trying to think, like, what are their top 3 strengths? Were they able to communicate their message effectively? Like, did people in the meeting, did they tend to have, for example, a lot of clarifying questions, like follow-up questions? Doesn't always mean that you're not being clear, but that's one of the signs that people are confused by you. They have to like ask a lot of questions to ask you to rephrase it in a certain way, and putting that context into the GPT prompt. So as a designer, you should be able to design algorithms, because an algorithm is completely useless if it just doesn't serve the users. But if you're a designer, like, you design for users, right? So I think sometimes people just think like algorithms, like, why would you be a designer and design for AI? That's an engineer's job. I'm like, no, it's not. I think it's actually design job, but if you know how to do prompt engineering, it helps you create the algorithms, work with the engineers to create the algorithms, and then that impacts the end user experience. Like, that's a direct translation about bam, bam, bam. Like, how does it all impact the end users?
I think if you look at not just like designing for AI and designing algorithms, but some of the other things that you mentioned, you start to paint potentially a very different picture of what it means to be a UX designer several years out from now. And so for someone who's new in their career and they have a lot of learning still ahead of them and they have to choose, like, where do I spend my time and what do I learn? What advice are you giving them? Like what do you think are the most important skills to pick up as, say, someone who is fresh out of school or fresh out of boot camp looking for maybe their first or second job as a UX designer?
Product strategy. That is probably paramount, in my opinion, because when I think about what an ideal product designer is, I think it's not so much like I serve users and I do research and I do wireframes and I don't know, what else designers do? Yeah, that. It's kind of a blend of everything in my opinion. And that means as a designer, you're also kind of like you're a bit of a product manager and you can be a little bit like of an engineer. I'm not saying to be those roles, but I'm saying to understand where these people are coming from and you can speak their language and you can understand how they make decisions. That's why I really care about prompt engineering, and I'm able to work with those engineers because like I understand how they think and we can work together to like create the algorithm. Similarly, when we think about here's this roadmap of like different things we can build in our product. Surely you're not just gonna do the thing that's like the most impactful to the user experience. I mean, because that's subjective. What does that even mean? Impactful, but what about the business? Are we gonna survive, right? Like you have to be realistic. I think a lot of junior designers in their careers are like, I'm angry because like no one likes my ideas. I mean, I was that person. Like, I am annoyed. Like, obviously this UX is so bad. Like, I hate to break it to you, but like that's kind of like just not really a priority. And I think if you just pick up a book, I really like the book Influential Product Manager. That was by my professor Ken Sandy. It like helps you understand like how do you have to realistically prioritize things. I think a lot of junior designers just aren't realistic. We can't create these pie in the sky things that like don't go anywhere. So that's one. Read that book or something related to that. I think too it's kind of hard to pick up like a CS course like that easily, but I think even just trying to learn how to build an application. It could be like a website in like a very, very easy course. It could be like HTML, CSS. And you get your hands dirty and you start coding a little bit, you kind of start to see, oh yeah, shit, I can't just ask engineers just to like randomly build these things. Like you have to there's a structure to how you build things, or you break them out in chunks. And that's why when you're as a designer, it can be helpful to, okay, maybe this is like an MVP, like a very first version, and then maybe like, this is a next version. You break things up with people. I think that's what makes you a better collaborator, is because you know where each of your partners is coming from and how they think. That's kind of, obviously, I guess those are like several steps that you could take, but I would say those are like, in my opinion, the first few steps you would take as a junior designer. Just get to know where your partners are coming from.
Man, this has been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. There's been so many great tips along the way. To close out here, one thing I'd love to circle back on is there are a lot of designers out there who are early in their career who are struggling with the job market right now because the job market's incredibly difficult. And, earlier you talked about not falling into the trap of external validation. I think interviewing and job hunting is one of those areas where that's really difficult because that external validation is getting the job offer. And when that is legitimately the goal of that process, it's hard not to be affected by that if when you're struggling. What advice do you have for people in that position who maybe are starting to doubt themselves because they've been struggling and aren't receiving that validation?
Yeah. Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on this. First off, I will say I want to recognize like the job market is so different from when I applied. And even when I applied, it was so hard. I got rejected all the time, so I can't even imagine like what it's like for people to what they're going through right now. First off, I will say that something I noticed with just different junior designers I've talked to is they have this like victim mindset. I think that honestly destroys you. And I've been a victim of the victim mindset. So an example of that would be like, I'm not getting this job offer because like I didn't study design. Well, those people like they got a design degree and like I didn't, or I don't know, like X, Y, and Z reasons. Like you're dude, you're so focused on like someone else, like you're not even like focused on yourself. I used to say that. I used to think like, oh, it's because I'm a sociology major and I didn't study design. Like that's why I'm getting rejected. Sure, that I'm sure if I had a design degree, it would probably be better. But you know what I should do? Make it look like I studied design. Why don't I go back in my portfolio and ask someone who is a strong visual designer to look at my work and think, what can I do to elevate that polish that's probably impacting the way recruiters are seeing my work? And I did do that. And honestly, it helped a lot. I got feedback. Someone was like, hey, this is really small, but I noticed that sometimes your mock-ups are like a little bit not pixel perfect. And like, oh, like the way that the text is, the way your copy is on your website's a little like disjointed or looks a little chaotic. And they're like, even the way that you lay out your portfolio says what your visual polish is. And recruiters, they're biased. They're going to go for what feels nice and doesn't feel cramped and sloppy. And I was like, shoot, I've been pointing fingers and being envious of other people who had design degrees. I didn't even think about like, what can I literally do to be a better designer? It seems simple, but right, like of course I should work on my areas of growth, right? But sometimes I think it's just people getting that trap. So yeah, I think that's like definitely my first piece of advice. And sometimes it's true, like you don't know what you need help with, and so maybe you don't ask. But honestly, like I think we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier about like solving problems. Like sometimes you just kind of like go for something, you're not really sure what's gonna come out of it. Sometimes just have an open conversation. Sometimes like I think sometimes it's just helpful to just like throw something out there and just talk to people. Just get a conversation. You're probably gonna learn something that you didn't already know. And so I think it's helpful to talk to other designers, ask for feedback, someone that you look up to, and yeah, just ask them what they think and just keep it open-ended. But you can even ask like, hey, how's my, like, look at the things recruiters tend to judge you on. Hey, how's my visual polish? How's my storytelling? Is this clear? Does my work seem impactful? Like those are probably like more pointed questions that you can ask, and that literally a standard thing you ask people as a criteria. So I think, yeah, just that's like what you could do if you don't already know what you need to work on. I think the second thing is like asking yourself, like, what does success look like to you? But the constraint is to not say that it's a job offer. Like on a day-to-day, what would a successful day look like to you today? And I think that's something I did when I was job searching. It's like, I think if I created this story arc of my portfolio, or I did like 25% of the story arc, I would feel like I did pretty well today. And then tomorrow, I think if I write this case study, I would feel good. And then you start to realize, wait, the day-to-day accomplishments are just like literally doing the work. Literally just doing the work. It's the freaking journey, right? So I think when people kind of think more about like what would day-to-day success look like, I think that could be helpful. Like, okay, I sent out 2 job apps, or I reached out to two friends who might be able to help me referral, or ask for like 1 person, or oh, I made the visual design of this website look better. I think those are better day-to-day metrics of success than like, oh, did I get the job offer or not? That's like so binary, and that's not even what it takes to be successful. All those things I said, one day, 25% of this, I mean, whatever, it could be 25% of it. You accomplish some small task, and I did this other small task, and I asked for feedback, and then I did this. You keep doing that consistently, that's gonna lead to great things.
Wow, that's so true.
Yeah, those are. I have probably like a ton more, but those are like the Kobe quote. He says something like, "It's not about." I'm trying to butcher this quote, but it's like it's not about like the end goal, right? The dream is the journey. That is the dream. The times when you don't want to put in the work, the times you show up to the gym, in this case you show up to your computer or whatever it is, that is the dream. You gotta tell yourself you're living that dream. Yeah.
I think that's such a great point to wrap up on. Before we leave, where can people find you online?
They can find me at linkedin.com/in/Jen Wong. It should have been J Wong, but I don't know why it's not J Wong. It's Jen Wong. Yeah. So they can find me on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, my portfolio is down because I don't want to pay Webflow anymore. So we won't be able to see what I was talking about portfolio stuff. But yeah, there's that. And where else can they find me? That's probably the main place. I will say, if anyone wants to reach out, and this is kind of related to the points about advice for people who are struggling with the job market, I actually don't answer to LinkedIn messages that come off very generic and copy and paste. Hey, I need a job. Hey, look at my portfolio. Hey, look, listen, I'm just FYI, I'm just not going to respond because if it looks like copy and paste, I don't I guess I don't feel as motivated to open it. So y'all, man, people out there, come on, man, stop doing the copy and paste. We notice it from a mile away. Okay. I mean, it's the more genuine you can be. I've had people reach out to me who are like, oh, I really like this specific thing you said on this podcast. Or it seemed like they were paying attention. And you don't have to even say much. Or, someone, I don't know, someone who sent me this very long email was like, oh my gosh, I saw in your career trajectory, you said you have ADHD and I do too. And how do I become a designer with this? Wow, you paid attention and you didn't have to say much, right? So yeah, the point about being successful, people are more likely to help you if you come off genuine and personalize your responses and make it seem like you're paying attention to the person. And two, I'll respond to you if, it seems like it wasn't copy and paste. Hi, Jennifer Wong, please give me a job. Please look at my portfolio. Yeah.
Cool. Jay Wong, thanks again so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. This was great conversation. I think we covered so much ground. Super interesting. I hope you enjoyed it too. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, it was fun. Great questions. Very thoughtful. I'm excited for you on your journey with Pixelated Path. I'll be following and staying in tune.
Cool. And that's a wrap with our conversation with Jay Wong. Her journey from navigating early career challenges to taking the leap into entrepreneurship offers a ton of inspiration. Jay Wong's experiences and insights into balancing corporate roles with personal passions really highlight the importance of authenticity and mental health in our careers. If you found this episode insightful, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you're always in the loop for our next deep dive into the fascinating world of UX design careers.